Hi friends, it's Becky and I wanted to share a project with you. I'm going to be making a little jewelry set, a necklace, and some earrings using beads from the Softflex Beltane Festival design kit. It is full of just really bright and fun colors, and we have been having some very stormy weather the past couple of days, and you'd think that that might inspire me to dip into like one of the rainy day kind of themed kits or something that we had in April. But I've really been craving sunshine, and so these happy yellows that we got in the design kit, and some of these really sweet little happy yellow flowers, and especially these partly cloudy sky cushion beads. These were just calling to me to put them together and make myself a happy, sunshiny day kind of a design. So I've gone ahead and made several of these links. I'm just using simple loops for the big chunky guys, and then we made some ones with some smaller beads. They're these tiny little table cut rice beads that we got in the kit with the yellow poking through, and I'll demonstrate both of those links with you. I'm going to be making a focal using this focal bead that came on the bead strand. Now the bead strand was not part of the kit. It's an add-on, and it's something that you can purchase separately. It's just a really fun little focal, and it's got those bright lemony yellow colors and themes. And then other things from the kit that I'm using, some of the findings are these like frond bead caps, some of these leaf bead caps, and these lucite beads. These came in the bead mix. And then we've got these little tiny 3mm fire polish beads in that lovely sunshiny yellow color. And I'm going to be using the lobster clasp that came in the kit and the 2x2 crimp tubes, as well as the bone color Softflex wire. Going to be using some of my scraps in that color as well, because the design that I'm using is it's going to need a few scraps and a few extra pieces of wire when we do this. For the links, I'm using some 20 gauge wire that is gold plated, and so we'll have those going. And then it's just for the focal that I'm going to be using the Softflex wire on that. I am adding from my stash just a closed ring for my focal, and then some curb chain to extend the length of the necklace. When I get it all put together. Also for my earrings, going to be using these ceramic beads, one of these blue drops, another one of these frond guys. If you don't have fronds, with fronds like these, I'm going to be using a single daisy spacer and two more of these leaf bead caps, as well as the lucite beads and our guys here. And then I've got an ear wire for that. So I'm going to move the earring things out of the way. For the earrings, you are going to need about 4 of the crimp tubes. So it will, it's going to use up some crimps with the way that we do our little design. But let me just demonstrate these links real quick before we go any further, and then we'll make our focal. So for the links and for the tools that I'm using for that, let me go over my tools. I like to use my one-step loopers as a little shortcut when I do simple loops. On my links, I will do the first loop with the one-step looper and the second loop with my round nose pliers. But I will demonstrate both methods, so if you don't have a one-step looper, you can still make these. I've also got flush cutters for cutting all of the wire, some chain nose pliers, and then for crimping, I'm going to be using my magical crimper. It's my favorite way of doing crimps. Alright, so let's move these out of the way and start with I like to straighten out my wire before I put my beads on and work off of the spool when I'm making links. So like I said, we're going to start with our links, and I like to put the bead on first. And then let me show you with the round nose pliers first. Now, there are two steps when you do a simple loop. One is kind of breaking the neck or bending it so that it's centered, and the other is actually forming the loop. For the first loop, I like to start with the loop and then bend it. So I'm just going to get the end of that wire right there in my round nose pliers. I like about 1/3 of the way down from the point for that size, but you could do any size that you want. That's just a preference of mine. And then holding my thumb against that, I kind of bend the wire around. And do you see how that loop is not centered? I will rotate the round nose pliers until they're just up against the side of this, and just bend it back a little bit, and that gets me a centered loop. I do like to work hard in my loops by giving it a little squeeze with my chain nose pliers. You can also use flat nose pliers because it's nice and flat in here, and that way the loop will stay. And then this is the reason I like to work from the spool, because then I can just measure from the bottom of the bead and do a little cut. I go about 1 finger's width. Remember to cut the wire, not your fingers. And then to make my second loop, I'm going to pinch both the loop and the bead. And you can either use some pliers to do this bend, or your finger, just to bend that right over the top. And I know from experience that this part of my finger measures about 1 centimeter in length. You could use a measuring tool, especially if you don't have fingers as thick as mine. But that's about where I'm going to want to snip that for my second loop. And then I made the bend first before I started the loop. So I'm just going to do my loop now. That's just inching it back around and getting that until it's touching the other side. And again, I like to work hard in my loops. And now I've got my link with my simple loops all finished, and I purposely did this so that my loops are perpendicular to each other. So if you grab both of the loops, they make a cross. You can do them so they're parallel, there's nothing wrong with that, but I just kind of like the way that a chain behaves if all of the links have perpendicular loops. It's just a preference thing when they're joined together like that. So let me show you how I do it with the one-step looper. Once again, I'll just straighten this out, especially when you have a long bead. You don't want to be trying to stick a longer bead on wire that's kind of bent or curved or has a kink, because it'll just get stuck. So just straighten it out. It'll be fine. So then with the one-step looper, I'll go ahead and put my wire right here in the one-step looper. You want to make sure it just extends past the edge of this bit here. It doesn't have to go all the way through to the hole, because that's just a little wasteful. But I'm just going to nibble off that little bit here when it passes the cutter as I squeeze my one-step looper, and it rotates around. And to give my loop that bend, I'm just going to press back with my wire, and that gives me a nice centered loop. Once again, I like to work hard in my loops. It'll also give me a chance to, straighten it out if I need to, give it a little extra zhuzhing a lot of times my loops with the one-step looper come out just perfect and they don't need a lot of extra work. I don't like it for that. But then the rest of this is going to be exactly the same as that first link, where I measure one finger down from the bottom of the bead that I put on. And then I hold the wire and bead with one hand and bend with the next. And like I said in the other, just previously, you can use your finger or you can bend it gently with some pliers to just get you that little bend over the top. I'm going to measure my 1 centimeter against my finger, and this part I'll use my round nose pliers to roll that loop up. Tuck that in and give that loop a little work harden. And then I've got my next link. And so I made several links of these. There were 10 of these beads in the kit. So I used all 10 of them, and then I used 12 of these little rice beads. These came in the bead mix. So I'll show you how to put those together in just a little bit when we assemble the necklace. So let me move a couple of these other things out of the way because it's time for us to concentrate on the focal. All right. Now for this focal, I'm going to be using a couple of scraps of wire from previous things. I like to save the scraps specifically for projects like this. What I want to do is make a couple of, I guess, dangles or drops using the wire and the crimp beads, kind of the way that you would have a I guess, what is it called? Like a head pin or something. So, but because it's wire, this wire instead of like craft wire, or instead of an actual head pin with like stainless steel or something like that, or brass, these are going to have a little more movement and a little more whimsy because the beading wire has a little bit of a curve to it. So it's going to sway and move and look more, you know, more fun, more less structured, I should say. So I'm going to take just the end of this wire and I'm going to make myself a little head pin on this wire. Let me move these guys out of the way just a little bit and zoom in so that we are only looking at this. Now I've got a little scrap from a previous project right here. And I know it's a little bit harder to see against my beige wire against a beige background. So I'm just going to get a darker background real quick to make it so that it shows up a little bit easier for y'all. There we go. So that you can see what I'm doing a little bit easier. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be crimping just the end of this wire. But I'm also going to shove this little extra scrap in here because it's going to give me enough wire for the crimp to hold on to. Because otherwise, when I crimp it, there just won't be enough meat in that ravioli. So I'm going to use my magical crimper. It is my favorite way of crimping. You can do this with a taco style crimp. It just might look a little bit different. And you could probably even cover up your taco style crimp with a crimp cover and have a nice little bead on the end of it. The reason I like the magical crimper is that it just gives me a nice little round bead of crimp without having to use those extra bits. So the hard part here is getting that crimp centered in there because that's the first part, and often the little bits will fall out. So sometimes what I will do is I'll make sure that my crimp is centered first. I'm not squeezing it. I'm just getting it seated. Right there, it's not quite centered. There we go, a little bit better. A little bit more. There we go. So now that I've got my crimp centered, I can grab my wires and just put them both through there. And since I'm putting the wires through after I center my crimp, I don't have to worry about it centering now. And I've got hold of both my wires and the crimp. They're not going to fall out, so I can give it an initial squeeze. And that squeezes just the corners of the magical crimper, or of the crimp. We're not squeezing the corners of the magical crimper. And I rotate it 90 degrees, give it another squeeze. Rotate it again. Give it another squeeze. And just keep rotating it around until all of the rough edges, all of the corners, all of those weirdnesses, the ovaliness has been smoothed out. You know, you open it, rotate it, squeeze. Open it, rotate it, squeeze. And then you've got a nice little ball of crimp down here. And so to turn this into a little head pin, I'm going to snip off the wire right next to that crimp on the short end. Then on the long end, I'm going to snip off this little bit of excess wire here. And now I've got a little head pin that I can hang things from. Let me grab another piece of wire. This one's actually going to be a little bit longer. It's going to be like my central one. And I need 2 more sort of shorter bits of wire for this. 1, 2. They don't all have to be the same length because I'm not going to want them to be the same length when they are dangling. So I've got that one. I'm just going to do these next 2. Or I'm going to do all three of these. Come here, friend. All right, let's get that centered. Okay. And I'm just working off the spool since I have run out of scraps now. Right there at the end. I'll cut off the bit next to the spool, or that's coming from the spool, right next to the crimp after I get it. A nice round crimp on the end. So that's one reason to keep your scraps. It's because, you know, you can actually do things with these like 2.5, 3 inch, maybe 4 inch long pieces of wire. And we are going to be doing something similar for the earrings as well. It just won't be 4 dangles, it'll just be 2 for the earrings. And this one is the longer one. This is the one that we're going to be building the rest of the focal off of after we get the dangle set. So I want this crimped. See how they've got this little curve to them. I love that. It's going to be whimsical. It's going to be fun. It's going to be cute. All right. Before I zoom back out, let's add our flowers. I'm going to start with the 3mm bead right there at the bottom, the lucite bead cap, and then this little leaf bead cap. All right. I'm going to put these on all of them. If you wanted to, you could crimp above that, but I don't really feel the need to do that. If you don't like them being loosey-goosey, that's fine. You can crimp above it, and that'll keep it on there a little bit better. It's like, where did my other lemon yellow guy go? I want all 4 of these on here. Hold on, did I miss? I missed the leaf bead cap on this one. All right. Now these are going to be different lengths, different sizes. I'm just going to crimp these 2 together first of all. So I need more crimp beads. And again, I want them to be different lengths, so let's do about there. That would be fine. And this is going to get me a few more scraps that I can use in other projects. After we get these cut off. So here we go. Actually, let's do that one a little bit longer, that one a little bit shorter. There we go. So that's about the lengths that I want them. These 2, I'm going to go ahead and crimp them. And then these 2, we're going to do the same thing. Crimp them together. It's about the same length, so let's scooch it down just a little bit to give us a different length. Okay, good. Yeah. I just don't want them to be crowding or making a line, a visual line. I like them to cascade a little bit. There you go. Where you want to crimp it is going to be completely up to you. When you do this, all right, now I'm going to take this shorter length up here, give that a snip so that I just have one longer one. And then on this, we're going to go ahead and snip one of these. It doesn't actually matter which at this point. because these two are now going to be crimped together. So that they end up like that. So let me get this in here. I could probably have really tried to shove 4 strands in the same crimp, but I would rather just try to crimp them together after I do the 2, like this. Now, it still doesn't look great, but that's okay because it's going to be hidden. So, let's crimp that right there next to it. Can be as wonky as it wants to be. Alright, and then this little bit here, I'm going to snip off. So then I will only have 1 strand left coming up out of the top. Now, to hide that, I'm going to make a little cone out of this frondy guy. To do that, I'm going to take my round nose pliers, stick this right here on the top, and then push down with my fingers all the way around. I'm just doing little pinchy movements. Doesn't have to be strong, big movements in order to get this bent down, but I'm rotating it as I do it so that I can try and make sure that they all get bent in the same direction in the same way. And then when I'm satisfied with how coney it is, like that, I will go ahead and put that right on here. See how that covers that up pretty nicely. All right, let's zoom back out. And then I'm going to add my focal bead up here. Like this. And I'm thinking that I'm going to just add one of these little opaque blue beads right here on the top because I'd like a little pop of blue. You know what, actually, let's do this one and then this. That way we can bring the blue into the whole environment. There we go. I like that. And now I'm going to use another crimp, and I'm going to crimp this onto this ring. It's a closed ring, but it is what we're going to attach our chain, the beaded chain that I'm making with those links I showed earlier. So we're going to attach it to. So I'm going to want to crimp. I'm going to go through the chain, back through the crimp. I guess my wire is just going to go everywhere. I'm just trying to adjust my loop length there. I'm going to be snipping that wire when I'm done with it. But first I want to get this crimp crimped. And I'm going to be crimping it exactly the same way I've done all of the others. Smush, turn, make sure it's centered. Smush and turn. sometimes you have to turn it around, and instead of holding the beads, hold the loop, because the beads will rotate, but the loop and the wire won't. You want to be able to go all the way around it. All right. Snip this sucker off. There we go. While it's laying down, these kind of float up, but when it's actually got gravity involved, they dangle very nicely. All right, I'm not going to need any more crimps until we do the earrings. But I am going to need my chain nose pliers so that I can start assembling this necklace. I'm going to move this out of the way now that we don't need that contrast anymore for now. And let's go. I already assembled one length of the chain, so I'm going to start with the other length so we can get all of that on here. It's basically going to be the same way that I assemble chain any other time that I do it. I'm going to be swinging open the simple loop link, simple loop on one of the links. Using my chain nose pliers, you just twist it and it swings open. Attach the next link in the chain and swing it closed to make sure it's good and closed. And then do the same for the next link in the chain. Swing it open, attach the next link, swing it closed. So yes, we are having some sunshine on a cloudy day with this necklace. Gotta make your own sunshine sometimes. Let's put that back on there. There we go. So that's my second length. And now I'm going to just open up this loop on the very end, put it through this closed ring. I'm going to attach this loop on the next side to the same ring. Isn't that pretty? Isn't that sunny? Isn't that happy? I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm going to grab a couple of jump rings to attach these to these loops. Even though I could just swing these open and attach them directly, I like having a little bit of, actually I'm going to do the open the loop with my chain. Now this is just about 4 inches of curb chain, that I'm using. And because this on its own, just this chain, it's a little bit short for my neck, for a necklace. So I'm just adding this curb chain along the side. It'll just extend the length a little bit. I could do it on both sides if I wanted to, but this way it'll make it more adjustable. So I can have it be shorter or longer depending on how I feel. So I'm just swinging that open, putting my curb chain on there. But I am going to grab a jump ring for the lobster clasp, just because I like my lobster clasps to have a little bit more, what is the word? Flexibility? Agility? I think you get what I'm saying, right? The ability to turn it in less awkward ways. So I'm just going to open that jump ring, put it on the loop, and my lobster clasp, and now I have a necklace. Loving this. It is just making me very happy right now. So let's move these guys out of the way. So pretty. Love this. And let's make an earring. So I'm basically going to be doing a similar thing with the earring that I did with my focal there, using some shorter lengths of the wire. But then I'm going to be just stacking some beads up on this and making a loop at the top that we put the ear wire through. So here are all of my little bits that I'm going to be using. I have an extra piece of extra wire here. So many little bits here. And I've got some things to stuff in there for my raviolis. So let's start with the first one. I just need 2 wires. I need one shorter and one longer. In fact, let me cut off the length of wire that I need for this. It's going to need to be long enough to still be able to do a loop up at the top for crimping, so that should be the right length right there. I'm just comparing it against the other earring that I already did. So for this is about 5 inches on that one, and then this one's about 2. So they'll hang about like that, and then we'll have some things stacked on there. So this is my extra that I'm going to be stuffing my ravioli with. So I've got both of my wires in here with my crimp. That's closer to the end of one of mine. So now I can just crimp it, and then we'll snip off our extra bits of wire, and we'll have a little head pin. Hey, my extra wire went flying. That's all right, I've got more. Got some more right there. Okay. Yeah, extra little bits of wire can be useful, especially for cases like this. All right, now I'm going to crimp the other end. This is my longer wire. Still want to crimp at the end of it. Oop. That wasn't quite centered, but that's okay. We can recover from it. Didn't get all 4 corners crimped. But that's okay, because I can just keep going and just keep rotating it. And even though it's a little bit dimpled on that little bit right there, it's still a decent crimp. And I'm okay with the way that that looks and the way that that's going to hold. All right. Now let's get our beads stacked on here for our dangly droppy parts. It's the exact same ones that we used in the focal for the necklace. The 3mm fire polish, the lucite bead, and these leaf bead caps. And now I'm going to want to compare this to my previous earring. The first one that you do, you can do it however you want. But if you want them to match, you're probably going to want to make sure that your crimps and your lengths are going to be even. So I'm going to want to crimp it about here. All right. I've got my fingernail where I want my crimp to sit. And I've just got a little pinch there so it doesn't slide down past that. Now I can crimp that bit right there. Let's just get that crimped on there. Crimp on it. There we go. So now this little excess bit I can snip off. And I need to make a little cone from my little frond piece. So I'm just using this part to hold it. I'm not squeezing this or anything. It's just my little thing that is giving the middle of it support while I pinch these down. There you go. Actually, this one probably could stand to be pinched a little bit tighter. That's fine. There we go. And now we're going to cover up that bead and the crimping like that. I'm going to add this blue drop fat bottom first. Put my little daisy spacer on here. And then I'm going to add my ceramic flower bead. And these do have a tendency to rotate. That's fine. But now I've got one more crimp. Put that up here on the top. Bend my wire back through that. Just going to feed it back through the ceramic bead. Don't want it to go all the way through to the very bottom. There we go. And this again is another part that I'm going to want to compare it with my previous one. So I've got a the same size loop up here at the top. All right, I want to get this centered if we can. And that wasn't quite centered, but that's okay again. Sometimes the bead gets in the way. We can snip off our excess here. These will be some fun, kind of whimsical, kind of sweet. I love the way it curves. That's the entire reason for using the beading wires, so that it curves in a fun little way. And then you can attach your ear wires to the loop we just made. And we've got some earrings to go with our sweet little sunny day necklace. All right, I'll go ahead and leave some links to Softflex below in the description if you'd like to check out their Beltane Festival kit. It is full of really bright and sunny and happy colors, and honestly, it's just something that I've been looking forward to for a while, or some happy colors. So I'm really pleased that we've got this to work with this month. I'll put a link to my unboxing as well. And I hope that you guys are able to have a bright and happy day. And if you don't have your own sunshine where you're at, you can always make some. Until next time, happy beading.